Hi, welcome everyone to McKeeman Communications Live After Lunch. I'm Whitney, and today we're going to be talking about the importance of a little tool called social listening. For those of you who haven't heard that term before, social listening is actually the process of monitoring your mentions or conversations related to your brand. Fun fact, social monitoring is really looking at the analytics, whereas listening really begins when you take actions based on the analytics you've collected. So there's really so much that goes into this, and we're really looking forward to getting into it with our special guest today. Wendy Scherer is actually the founding partner of the Social Studies Group. It's a social media research firm that provides deep analysis of social media conversations to really help companies better understand their customers, their competitors, markets, industries as a whole. So really her love for research and social media began in the 1980s. We were just going over this in our call last week. She worked on the Genie Project account, which is GE's, General Electric's online service that happened back in the late 80s, beginning 90s. So I know there's so much more fun facts to share on that. So I'm going to bring her on. Another fun fact for our viewers, Genie was actually the pioneering online service. Hey, Wendy.
Hey there.
Before actually it was replaced by World Wide Web. So that's right, before www. I was just giving them a little background on your bio, Wendy.
Oh, wonderful.
So I was just telling them a little bit about your history, the company, and how you first started with GE. And I guess back when you worked with them, did you have any idea what the internet and social tools would look like today?
Yeah, actually, I think that we did have a pretty good idea. I worked with some really smart people over there and at our agency, and we wrote some position papers at the time, really looking forward. And it's kind of remarkable to see what has happened. It's been a lot of fun to track it, but we had some ideas. I mean, there's definitely some things that are surprises always, but
Yeah,
because it's crazy. Yeah, it's been fun.
That's neat to see it from start to finish, or where we're at today, I guess. So what made you turn to social media and then eventually focus more on the listening aspect?
So I started at an ad agency, and that's where I worked for a long time. I was a partner at a firm for a while, and there was such a big need for secondary research and digesting of huge volumes of information. And since I loved online so much, it seemed like a natural to be able to do that. And I ended up with some really, really smart clients who asked some very, very hard questions. And kind of together, we started looking at how to measure online mentions. People didn't even know the word social media yet, and figured out some really interesting methodology and just really forged ahead. Kind of, it was kind of like the Wild West, trying to figure out what was going on. And we did a lot of really interesting things. And as the tools have increased and the need and the knowledge of the clients has changed, our work just keeps growing and changing. It's a very creative business to be in.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're talking to a social media gal here. We love it. We love learning every day. It's constantly changing.
Totally.
So how did you start the Social Studies Group?
So it started actually as a secondary research firm, but then when our clients, and it had a different name, so it was 1995, and social didn't really make sense back then. But so the name has changed a couple of times, but it's really just been morphing with the time. So it was secondary research, then we added primary. So we were doing qualitative and quantitative research to whatever our clients needed. And as the social media pieces of it grew more and more, we've just expanded into much deeper analytics in that, insights into that piece. It's really what companies need is insights. They want smart, fast, reasonable insights.
For sure. And that actually brings us to a good question. It was just submitted. How do you keep up with everything, meaning the constant changes of social media and, there constantly being a new way of approaching it?
Well, I can't keep up with everything, but I do read a ridiculous amount every day. I absorb a lot. I have a lot of feeds coming in, and I do social media monitoring for the topics that I care about. So I have feeds coming into me all the time, but it's also such a passion that it's something that I just really like to keep up on, and my whole team does. And my clients do too. They're very interested and very engaged. It's not, it's definitely their partnerships there. It makes it really nice.
I love that. That's the best partnership to have, is those that are really engaged and want to learn with you. So
Yes.
I can totally agree. But I would say probably now more than ever, I feel like brands big and small need some form of social listening, for both like really proactive and brand building, as well as customer recovery. Do you find that people you talk to are naturally doing some form of this, or do you feel like they just don't know where to begin?
I think everybody's doing some form. At the lowest level, people just kind of getting Google alerts or searching on Twitter, just really just ad hoc when they want to know something specific, to people who have very complex systems set up so that they can really track their industry and topics and target audience issues, and some really serious issues all the time. So it's
Right.
a really big spectrum.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I guess when we have most people who come to us and they're first starting out, with social listening, they maybe can't afford always the top tier tools and they want to kind of test it themselves a little
Mhm.
bit. What would be the top three things that you would recommend that they start doing?
That's a great question. If you're using a tool like a Hootsuite or something that has a place for perpetual search, I would definitely put in keywords and people to track that are in the subject matter that you care about. There's a couple of very inexpensive or free tools that are terrific. Mention.com is inexpensive. You can, at the next level, it's still inexpensive, but it's free at the lower level. It's terrific. It's definitely great, and it's so user-friendly to put in your keywords in your industry and your own handles to be able to see what's going on. There's another one called Social Mention that I think is fantastic for looking at a really quick snapshot of keywords that are being used within the topics that you're searching for. So it helps you learn how to search better and really breaks down some important points. So those are some great ways to start, but being super curious is really the key. And whatever the platform that your industry seems to be on the most, and the news, of course, are really important to watch. And there's a lot of simple ways to even do that, just the daily habit, even if it's manual.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I know some companies, may think or wonder, if I bring on this tool, is that really doing all the work for me? Do I still need to have somebody who's, kind of playing quarterback with the tool and reporting back to me? What should that level of work look like?
So that's my favorite question in the whole world. There are no tools that replace human reasoning,
Mm-hmm.
none. It's very important that somebody is actually thinking about what they see when you're bringing in even any kind of data, you're just even tracking, just plugging out, pushing out a report has no meaning. It only has meaning when somebody understands what it means and what the implications might be. So everything needs a human being attached to it. That doesn't mean that everything that comes across your desk is equally important, but there definitely needs to be somebody who owns that dissemination of information or understanding of the information.
No, I completely agree. And, sometimes, especially for the smaller businesses, that person, at least at the start, may be that owner. They may be somebody who isn't a natural in the social
Mm-hmm.
realm. So, when you're brought on for social listening, and what's your approach to determining these trends, and how do you really insert yourself into the right conversations, on and off the brand page?
That is really tough. So the first thing before, when you said, how do you get into it? The
Yes.
first thing is understanding why you're doing it, what you want to learn, and what you're trying to accomplish. You can't really do anything well if you don't know what you're trying to do. So understanding your objectives for even doing the research in the first place is very important. And if you're simply monitoring just to see and track, that's fairly basic, and that's somewhat easy to set up. But if you're trying to learn something, you want to know what it is, really think hard about how to bring that information in and how not to limit your searching and your queries with your own preconceived notion of what the answer is.
Mhm.
So you want to go broad enough so that you can then see a bigger picture of data and then understand within it. So segmentation is a big part of that. I don't engage for my clients online. I do help them with their engagement online, knowing what's important and what's not, and what to never respond to, which is
Right.
almost as important as what to respond to. But as far as the consumer side, consumers want to be talked to. If they're talking to a brand, they want to be heard. That's their whole reason for doing it. So
Oh, yeah.
that's super
Well,
important.
I even think of all the different social listening tools. Yes, copy and posting and those types of things play into it, but even hashtag strategy, we were talking to a client the other day, car insurance, and, that's not necessarily something that people go directly to your page. They can't wait to learn more about your car insurance. But, how do you get your content out there so that people really, want to see it and they find it helpful? And so, like, even thinking about, not using hashtag car insurance, but things that people are actually searching. So hashtag new car, hashtag Ford Mustang, or whatever that may be, and so, like, that's a form of social listening as well, which I find so interesting, is like how you can insert into those new hashtag conversations.
Yes. Absolutely. But if you flip it around the other direction, if you look at what people are talking about in the insurance conversation, you can understand what the consumer needs are, what their language is like, what they're asking for, what they're missing, what they're happy about, what they're not happy about. And you can craft your own marketing messages and your strategy to support the consumer needs, which is obviously the best way to sell your product.
Right. Exactly. And we actually have a question here. If you were to prioritize social media channels for small businesses and entrepreneurs, which would you suggest focusing on?
So I think it depends what kind of business you're in. And my vision's not great, but I think you're a photographer.
Yes.
When I think about, and I don't know if it's business photography or consumer, if it's portraiture or events, but I would spend most of my time where I think my clients are. So if you are a portrait photographer, a very good friend of mine does beautiful senior portraits and families, and she spends a whole lot of time on Instagram and Facebook because that's where her customers are. If you are doing photo shoots for corporate kinds of shoots, I'd spend a whole lot more time on LinkedIn. Yep. And making connections there. So I think it really depends on who your target audience is.
I completely agree. And we actually have a couple others. So first one being, how do you turn social listening data into action items for brands?
It depends. Sorry, that's a terrible answer. It depends. So typically there's a couple of different things. There are for crisis management, some of the ways we turn into action is to find ways to see problems before they arise. And then my client uses that to reach out to his clients to show that he is ahead of the game, that he knows things before they hit market. So to be able to be proactive. So that's one good way to be able to turn that around. Another is looking for, let's say, flavor trends, so that my client knows when they're looking at developing recipes, what's hot, what's up and coming that hasn't really saturated the market yet. So there's always ways to get knowledge, like in any other kind of research, that would help you plan and make decisions for what you're trying to do. And the other thing that I always like to say is that the amount of time and energy and money that you spend on research should be proportional with the benefit that you get from it or the risk that it is. So if it's super low risk or not expensive, trial is easy. But if it's a big shift or an expensive fail, you want to do more research.
No, I completely get that. And then really the next one here is, how do you approach posts that go viral, especially if they're not positive?
Well, it's really important to have a plan for what happens when something is not positive and to know what those things might be. And we all know in our own businesses what those things, the major topic areas, maybe not the specific incidents. And every company really needs to make their own decision about how much risk they're willing to take. Engaging with haters is a challenge. Many companies do it really well and really from a position of strength, and they can do that. When the one thing that I just always find to be so sad to watch is when people get super defensive. It's usually not helpful. You can't stop it from going, but you can handle what you do about it.
No, I completely agree. And I mean, I think it's so important to have that recovery process. And with that, it should match your brand voice with your proactive posting as well. Mm-hmm. Like I think of brands like a Wendy's, for instance, and they kind of have a sassiness to them. So no matter whether they're proactively sharing a product or service, whatever that may be, or responding to a complaint, I think that they kind of use that brand voice across the board so that it makes sense for them. But, Wendy, I know one thing that we used to do back in the day is really kind of rank also those posts, those issues, those complaints, the level of importance and how do we kind of bring in the right people and take the right actionable items How do you recommend brands approach that, especially bigger brands?
So one of the things that I'm really lucky to work with a couple of companies that are very involved with their industry groups. And often the larger industry group that they fall into has really good support and messaging and helpfulness to be able to prioritize some of those issues of concern.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really helpful for busy companies. And particularly, I mean, medium and small companies, the larger companies might have a big staff. But if you don't have a big staff, being able to take advantage of work that's already been done by people who are putting so much energy into it, and you need to put your own flavor onto it, but it's really helpful to structure those plans. And having a plan in place is just really key, because getting caught off guard at Friday at 7 o'clock at night, and it's always Friday at 7 o'clock at night. I mean,
Or hey, for me, it was Christmas morning.
oh no, that's
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah, you never can tell, but we were prepared, and so that very much helped.
Good.
Well, when you are listening on social and your client comes to you and says, how do we know this is working? What are the KPIs that I should be tracking? Which, by the way, for folks listening, if you're not familiar, KPI means key performance indicators. So what are those metrics that we should be tracking just to make sure what we're doing is working?
Well, it depends. Again, however you set up your program and what you think is important is what you should be tracking. And for many of my clients, engagement is the most important thing. Reach is important. You want a lot of people to hear what you have to say. But what matters to me deeply is that content resonates with who we're talking to. And if it does, they're going to like it. They're going to comment on it and they're going to share it. And depending on what you're trying to do, or maybe drive traffic to a site if it's e-commerce. But to me, sharing is one of the best results. And that's something that I really look at, particularly in engagement, because a like is great. A comment is really nice, but sharing it then gives me an opportunity that I didn't have before. So we're very appreciative of that. And so much of our work is not really about that kind of KPI. So it really depends what you're trying to do. Sometimes really what it is just trying to come out with understanding and knowledge and answer questions, or even support business decisions. So, there you have a very different goal in mind.
Oh yeah. I mean, even just listening to know, okay, this type of content we're seeing our customers are sharing more of. So we need to share more of it to continue to get that sort of KPI metric to increase. So I think that that's so important. So if a brand does want to invest, I know you mentioned some of those tools that were free, but if they do want to invest and have a few more features to really kind of help them prioritize and take on more roles, if you will, are there some go-tos that they could look into?
Sure, there's a lot of great tools. One that I actually don't even think I mentioned to you earlier that I love for content understanding is BuzzSumo. BuzzSumo is a terrific tool. It does a lot of really interesting things, and it can really help you understand, not only identify who's talking about certain subjects, which is great, but to see what is resonating with the public. So you can put in a keyword, for instance, and see what articles are the most shared and understand what those are and where they came from. So that's a really cool place to start. My tool of choice is BrandWatch. It's my favorite social listening tool. It's pretty powerful. It allows for all kinds of segmentation and cross-tabbing. It's a pretty complex data manipulation, which is great for me. Also, I'm really liking the social listening in Sprinkler, which is another corporate tool. It's a pretty, it's a fairly pricey, but very robust tool that does a lot of other things besides that. Does content management and engagement. Does a lot of things. It's pretty neat. So those are my two favorites, but there's a lot of great tools out there. Sprout Social, more of a medium price tool, lower price, lower cost, is great, very intuitive, clean, which I always appreciate. And actually, that's one of the ones I recommend if someone has a small budget and wants to get started. It's a really good place to start. It also has add-ons, so you can get a little bit more complex if you want.
Ooh. Yeah, we might have to do some demos. Those are always fun. Well, and I know you mentioned too, social listening doesn't replace traditional research by any means. But once again, when people are getting started or they're kind of looking more into how they can up their social listening, do you feel like they should start with traditional research? Or is there like a prioritization, or do they kind of need to do them all at the same time?
Well, typically, social listening can be a great jumpstart for traditional research, because traditional research can be very pricey, and it can be a way to have a better understanding of consumer needs, or like before you go and hire somebody to develop research for you. So I love that. It can save you time and money to get you started. It also, a lot of times people will do a traditional research study, like a survey, in tandem with social listening, and then do some comparative to see what the difference is, whether your audiences are aligned. It's a great way to support the work that you're doing. So I think that there's lots of different ways to look at it, but they work really well together. And again, a lot of it's about how big the risk is, because traditional research can have a big price tag. And if the risk is really low, then I'm not sure that that's always worth investing in. But certainly in some industries, it's a must-have.
Gosh, I feel like we could have a whole part 2 to this conversation. There's so much detail to get into. I'm even thinking of great examples of some of the ones that we've, really been able to change the game in social just because of social listening. You kind of approach some where, they might say, I don't know if there's a reason for me to have social listening because I don't get enough comments, or I don't get enough interaction on my page. But there's probably some listening that can be done to get you more of the comments, to get you more of the engagement. So it's all going to kind of help each other and work together. So it's just been so nice talking to you. I don't know if there's anything else that you really wanted to hit today with us.
Yeah, I have my one little tagline that I always need to say: social media monitoring tools don't solve problems. People solve problems.
And hey, that's the key words of today. We need to always remember that.
Yeah. So there's so much you can do, and I just love talking about it. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you bringing me on today.
Oh, of course. And thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a good rest of the week, and thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you guys again for just leaving your questions and tuning in. As a reminder, we'd love for you to share our content and let us know what you want to hear more of moving forward. If you're interested in talking with our team a little bit more, we actually have a free 1-hour session on our website. You can just click the button, sign up, and we'll contact you right away. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you our next live after lunch.